Do you want to give a little bio, or do you want me to give one?
I can if you, yeah, sure. So why don't you, well, yeah, okay. So I'm Emily Dangermond. I am an assistant professor of biology at Roosevelt University. I'm an ecologist, and so I study species interactions and where species occur. I mostly am focused on plants and plant ecology, plant distributions. Um, and most of my research has a either conservation biology and or climate change component. What else do you want to know?
um, so I'll just start with asking you some basic questions about your history.
Okay.
How did you decide on your field of study / major during college? Did it just come naturally to you, or are you curious about the other fields, so you did a bit of exploring before settling on environmental ecology?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I always knew I was interested in, well, I didn't even know if ecology was actually the right term, but environmental something, I guess. I knew I was interested in the outside and environmental problems and potential solutions and conservation, but I didn't really know what to do with that. Like I didn't know what jobs were in that field. So, I'd heard of like, I don't know, the Nature Conservancy or the Sierra Club, like places like that. But I didn't really know about doing research and doing ecological research and being out in the field and studying plants and animals and interactions until I went to college. And I had identified environmental studies as the major that I wanted to study, and that allowed me to do some biology and some other science, but then also learn about like sort of more economics and environmental ethics, and like get a broad kind of range of things that were all related to environmental issues. Um, and then I started doing, and maybe this is where you're going with your questions, but then I started doing research with an ecologist, and I realized that that was really awesome, and that's what I wanted to keep doing.
Actually, that's my very next question is, when,
Okay.
what would you say was your very first research project? What level were you then? Did you have a
Okay.
faculty mentor?
Yeah, so I did. So I actually had, so before I actually started doing the ecological research that I'm doing now, I was in college and I started working in a lab that was a biogeochemistry lab. So they also were very interested in where species occur and why they occur there, but they were doing something totally different. They were looking at microbes, so bacteria and archaea that lived in extreme environments like hot springs in Yellowstone and hydrothermal vents in the ocean. And so like their field work was really awesome because they got to go to cool places and, basically collect water samples and then bring them back to the lab and grow the bacteria. And I just got to see the lab component of that. So like growing bacteria and counting them under a staining them and counting them under a microscope and then washing dishes. And, it was cool. And I really appreciated that experience. And everyone I worked with is great. But I realized that there were other areas I wanted to explore other than biogeochemistry. So I then had a mentor I worked with in the summer. It was a plant ecologist, specifically a population ecologist. And she was basically studying rare and endangered plants, sometimes invasive plants too, and actually modeling their population growth to see how, if say a rare plant species was likely to extinct and what changes could happen to its population biology to prevent it from going extinct. And there were just like a lot of cool questions, and the approach she was using was to monitor and follow the demography of a population of plants over time, and then model it with mathematical modeling to project into the future, say 50 or 100 years into the future, what is going to happen to that population based on what we know now about it. So I thought that was a really powerful tool. And what I got to work on with her was an endangered plant out in California that is a lupin, which I don't have a picture of here, but it's this little tiny plant that grows out on sand dunes, and it makes these big like pea pod like fruits. And unfortunately, this little plant with the big yummy tasty fruits are good dinner for mice that live out there. And so this poor little endangered plant species that only has a few populations was having all its seeds, or most of its seeds, being eaten by mice. And we were able to actually model population growth of the species and show that if you could reduce the amount of seed predation by mice, then the population would start increasing as opposed to decreasing. And it turns out that the mouse population had also increased in that area due to an invasive grass. So there were a couple factors happening. There was a non-native grass out on the sand dunes that was actually, it's called European beach grass, and it was brought in to stabilize sand dunes in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's all up and down the West Coast now. And what it does is it's a lot denser and has deeper roots than the native dune grasses. And the mice love it because it's thick, it's dense, they can hide from predators like, owls and birds of prey that might eat them. And so they were able to build up their densities to higher rates and then sort of increase their pressure on the surrounding plant populations. So luckily in the national seashore where we were working, they were already planning to remove some of that grass because it's also not good for the native birds that use sand dunes. So we showed with this model that if you reduce seed predation, this endangered plant population will increase as opposed to decrease, and will hopefully likely avoid extinction. So now they've actually removed some of the beach grass and have decreased the density of mice that are eating the seeds of the endangered plant. That was my first main research experience with a mentor.
How did you meet her? Was she like one of your professors, or?
That's a good question. I did take a class with her, but I think I may have started working with her before. So it actually was something that I think the ecologist, it wasn't necessarily an Office of Student Research, but it was like the biologists who were doing research at the time and could take on undergraduate students did a little bit of a demo for us about what they're doing, what their research is, and people that were interested went and listened, and I talked to her after that. So I think I had maybe met her once before, just in passing, and then at some sort of event, and then actually talked to her specifically about research, and she wanted to make sure that I was the right person for the job as well. But then she took me on, and I took a few other undergraduates, and we went to California and we learned how to do field work.
I guess my next question is, what advice would you share with the students who are at Roosevelt University who are looking for a PI or a research project to join? How should they approach you and other PIs here? Where can they gather such information? Because that's such a common question we always get.
Right. Yeah. And we actually do have some of the professors in our department, which is biological, physical, and health sciences, that are doing research. And then I know for a little while, at least Dr. Weiner was collecting information on who was doing research over the summer, if as sort of being a point person. So maybe we should try to collect that and give it to the Office of Student Research. But I think so a lot of professors, not all of them, but a lot of them are doing research, but we're not always ready to hand someone a project right away. And so sometimes, even if you're interested in doing research, but maybe being a little flexible on when you might start it can be a good idea. Like, maybe I'm interested in doing something next semester or over the summer. That can give us time to plan too while we're teaching classes. But we also have independent research for credit, which is a nice thing. A nice way to do research during the semester. And I think it's hard to know what research is before you do it, I think. And I know that myself and my colleagues are all aware of that because we've been in that same place. But it also does take commitment, right? So it takes a time commitment and a willingness to learn. And normally, that would usually involve some lab work or some field work. Right now, everything's either online or not happening. So there's basically a delay, or there's online things I know, even though I can't go out and do all the field work I'm planning to do, I do a lot of data analysis and collecting some data online, which you've been involved in, downloading data that are available online and analyzing it, because a lot of ecology is actually data exploration and data analysis.
Besides the research project you worked on, what else did you gain from your mentorship experience, and how did it facilitate your growth, either academically or otherwise?
Yeah, so I felt like it was really great for me to work with a group of women, actually. So it was a female professor, a female postdoc, and then a bunch of female students. We did have some male students occasionally, but it was like there was, my first year, I think it was all women. And it was like, that was just cool to just be part of a group of women doing science. So that was just like a kind of fun atmosphere. And then I just learned that I liked the people I worked with. I liked ecologists in general. And then I was able to make connections that, my professor was able to help me when I was applying to graduate school, and basically encouraged me to go to graduate school. I don't think I would have even known how to do that or why to go if I hadn't had her mentorship.
So was this the experience that sort of inspired you to continue on with research beyond?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I would say doing research as an undergraduate definitely encouraged me to continue doing research, as a career, because I then went on and have continued doing research ever since.
And I guess my question to you is, what is your style of mentorship? And I guess does each PI have their own style? How do you develop your?
That's a good question. So one of the things I love about research is it's just this idea that you are learning something new that no one else knows. Like, it's just not known. There are facts that are not yet known, and we are learning them, and we are uncovering them and making them known. So I think for me, like, if I'm doing my job well as a mentor, I am trying to get whoever's working with me, students that are working with me, will be excited about the research and about the results of the research. Any research, any science can be really tedious at times, like counting things or analyzing things or checking things, over and over again. It seems like there's always lots of what we call drudge work. And so if you can get through that because there's something good on the other side of that, that's the goal. I think also, like, fostering independence is really important. So usually, like, I try not to just say, okay, here's this project, go do it. I say, here's what I'm working on. Here are some approaches, is this interesting to you? And then some of the students that I'm working with right now, I'm trying to work with them. Like, even though I have ideas and methods and techniques we can use, I'm trying to work with them so that they are developing a project that they are excited about, right? So that they're sort of choosing something that they want to do, that they can stick with at least for a few months, and take ownership over it too. But I guess, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, continue. I don't mean to cut you
I
off.
was just gonna say, I don't know in terms of like general mentorship qualities. Some people just, whatever their experience was being mentored, they either say, okay, that worked or that didn't work, so I'm gonna do that or not do that. But I think, like, that's a skill that all of us are always learning, is how to be good mentors. And so, like, we sometimes go to workshops, but just experience and getting feedback from students is helpful too.
You touched upon this a little bit, but my next question was, what qualities do you look for in your mentees to have? Sort of.
Yeah, it definitely helps to be independent and motivated. Like, if research is very driven by yourself, I guess. Like, there's not always a bunch of deadlines. There's not always a bunch of other people asking for products or presentations. Sometimes there are deadlines, and that can be a good thing. But a lot of it is just, I have to show up and get things done, and no one's telling me exactly what to do because no one's done this exact project before, So there's a lot of, like, you have to really believe in yourself because sometimes making it up as you go. But I think like just a willingness to learn and to be excited about the research is important. So like, for example, previous mentees have not necessarily wanted to become ecologists, but they can still get excited about the research we're doing. So that's great. I don't care if you want to go to dental school, for example, but if you are, I mean, that's great. I do care, but it doesn't make me not want to mentor you. It just means that, you know, I just want people that are going to work well with me, with each other, you know, use a critical eye, be excited, be willing to present. Everyone has different strengths, and part of this is identifying those and building on them and learning new skills.
And then how flexible is research in terms of, you know, people who maybe have at home situations that might not allow them to, you know, be there in the lab 5 times a week or
Right. Yeah, so I would say like, so right now I think everyone is being forced to be more flexible in a way. Like it's probably not a great time to get involved in a lab project that you need to be somewhere at a certain time if you can't be there. But that doesn't mean it will never be a good time for that. And that doesn't mean there aren't other projects that you can do. I mean, for me, like, so because I do field work and and that's true of lab work too. It's true of any project, I think, is that things don't go as planned. Like you plan something out and you can write a beautiful paper description of what you're doing, and then you start doing it and everything changes. And so I think that's true anyway. And that's true now where you just sometimes can't get to where you're supposed to be, or you can't do what you had planned. And so you have to improvise and you have to change things and you have to be flexible. And I think part of to set someone up for success, or to set yourself up for success, it's good to not have rigid deadlines when it's unrealistic to meet them. Or like right now is not a time when I'm, you know, planning to be in the lab 5 days a week, because I know I can't be there 5 days a week, and I wouldn't expect students to be there 5 days a week. But that means I can do a lot of other things that I'm trying to schedule. So it just kind of depends. I've done, you know, field work for months at a time where I have to know that I'm going to be gone for either weeks or months. But that's not, you know, that's not all the time. That's not every year. It depends. Some people do, they pack their whole family up and they go to a different place for the whole summer. But a lot of us are not doing that right now.
and then this will tie in with your presentation. What does research in your field typically consist of, and what areas of research do you love / contribute to?
Yeah, so I could say, like, in general, ecology and environmental biology really are concerned with interactions between species and the environment. A lot of ecology is focused on what's called global change, so climate change and all the invasive species, habitat destruction. But that's because those are such big problems affecting our natural ecosystems. A lot of ecology is also just, why do species occur where they do? Why do they live where they do? Like on this map that I'm showing here, this is a species called starflower that we have here in Chicago, but it doesn't occur really very far south of Chicago, at least not in many places. And so one of the questions is, well, why is that? You know, why is it so much more abundant as you move farther north, and it's less abundant further south? And it probably has something to do with temperature, and its kind of climatic tolerances and the available habitat, but it also may have to do with kind of more long-term, large-scale patterns like glaciation, you know, 10,000 years ago, impacts what we see today in the Midwest. So that's just to say, you know, that's something I'm looking at right now. I'm interested in what explains patterns of abundance and distribution. I think a lot of ecologists are at some level. One thing that I'm particularly interested in is how species distribution, so where they occur geographically, how those distributions are changing in response to climate change. So in this map here, we might expect that as the climate warms up, we'd see like species that are adapted to colder temperatures might actually be extirpated or like go extinct from warmer sites. What's interesting though is the more I think about this and the more I see what's happening out in the real world, I realize that more northern places, so like the Arctic, is actually warming at a faster rate than temperate places. And you can see that even within the Midwest, is that northern Minnesota is where these plants do really well generally, is actually warming faster than like the Chicago region. So that's, and southern Wisconsin. So that kind of introduces this interesting element that I have to think more about and gather more data on, and figure out what does that mean for this species? Like, is it going to do well in places that we don't predict it will? I mean, it's you know, it's something that's what I love about doing research, is like there's all these new questions that come up with any new information you get. So the job is never done, and that's one of the good things, but also one of the challenges. I could talk too about another project. Oops, sorry, I didn't realize there was narration on that slide. This picture that I'm showing here is a map of Florida, and what I've been studying in Florida is mangroves, which are these tropical plants that grow in southern Florida. They typically do not occur in northern Florida. At least historically, in recent years, that has been not been the case, that they are in northern Florida. But they have, in the last 30 or so years, increased in abundance and also moved north in this ecotone that's in between the mangroves and the salt marsh kind of dominant zones. And so that's causing these big ecosystem changes. And I've been looking at this with a number of other people, but they're doing all sorts of interesting things, like moving further north, becoming more freeze tolerant, having babies at younger ages. There's like all these ecosystem consequences of nutrient cycling, and even changing the temperature within the salt marsh, because it's warmer under the shrubs and trees than it is out in this kind of grassy area. So there's a lot of really cool things happening, and you can't look at everything by yourself. So that it helps to be part of a larger research group that's all working on the similar system, similar questions or different questions within the same system.
How do you collaborate on such a large scale research project?
That's a good question. And sometimes it takes, like, I think really good collaborations have a couple of very motivated people who are sort of the center of the project and can recruit new people to it. At least that's one model I've seen. There may be other ways to do it. But so in this case, I know, I was previously working with a researcher who had a large grant, was doing all this work in this ecosystem. And then she found other people to collaborate that had graduate students that could work on it. And people have sort of dispersed to different places, but some of us are still working on the project and some aren't. So it's just sort of grown as time has gone on, and more people get involved and hear about it and want to work on some, like, so for example, when I first started working on this, and then my previous mentor from when I was a postdoc is the person that was sort of working on it for longer. There wasn't really anyone looking at the microbial community or the underground, like, nutrient cycling that's happening in this ecosystem. But now there are, because enough of us have been working on it and talking about it and attracting other people to the system. So that's been really fun to see. I think I think there's multiple ways of having these collaborations, but if you find something that's interesting and then you can get other people excited about it, that's a good start, I think.
So there's a lot to gain from, I guess, you work with microbiologists as well, with like interdisciplinary.
Yeah, right. And I don't do anything myself with microbes, or I've been there, done that, and I don't want to do it again. But if someone else wants to, that's great, because then I don't have to. Similar with, like, anything, whether it's a genetic question or more of a climate question. And some people do like modeling of climates and temperature modeling and mapping, that everyone sort of has a skill set that they can contribute that's really helpful. And it's also like, at Roosevelt we just have a smaller school, a smaller place than maybe University of Illinois, but we can still collaborate and work with people at other institutions. And I would say even people at a larger institution are doing that. They're collaborating with people outside of their own university and finding other people. So for undergrads, I think it's totally okay to find a mentor at a different institution as well, whether that's, I mean, a lot of people look for that over the summer. Maybe a few people do that during the school year. It's, there's multiple ways to get involved.
And how do you maintain these research networks, so to speak?
So sometimes I mean, usually I guess there's a couple of ways of maintaining a research network. And it can fall more on one person than another too. I don't always do a lot of work in terms of maintaining it, other than kind of working on my piece that I'm working on, and then communicating with other people via email. But sometimes we start new projects, and that strengthens the network. I actually did start a new project last year with someone else that's working on this mangrove salt marsh ecosystem. She had set up an experiment, and I said, well, here's a potential extension of this experiment. Like, how about I write a grant and we'll see if we get it funded? And we did. So that was awesome, except then I wasn't able to travel this summer, fall due to the pandemic. So I'm sort of tapping my feet, waiting to go, and when I can, get the work done that I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay. So I guess other than delaying some projects, how did the pandemic change the way you conduct research moving forward?
Yeah, well, I haven't done any lab work lately. I probably would be doing some, or would have been doing more if I had been in the lab. But then also just not being able to travel. A lot of my work is travel based. So I ended up doing a lot of staring at my computer this summer instead of being out in the field. But I was still able to visit a few sites. That's the nice thing about ecology, or at least the ecology I do, is that if I'm outside by myself, it's usually okay. So I was able to do a few things more locally. But it did, I think it slowed down research for everyone, even ecologists who work outside. Everyone got delayed. Things that were supposed to happen in March or April or May just didn't happen, or got moved back. So I think the real impacts remain to be seen, and we might not know for a year or two how much of an impact this has had. But it is what it is, I guess. So just hope to recover and move on after.
Mm-hmm. I guess, how adaptable is research to these circumstances?
Well, that's going to vary on depending on the research project. I mean, for me, like, I don't, some of the things that I look at only happen once a year. So if I don't catch them this year, then I'm delayed by a whole year. And that just means I just don't have data for this year. There are other things that I can maybe look at instead, or kind of shift focus a little bit to still do something. But there are certain like burning questions I have that I really can't answer without data from certain times of the year. So I just have to wait.
This is sort of a similar question, but have you had any negative experiences / learning moments throughout your career?
Yeah, I think this is actually, I will say I'm very fortunate that most of my research experiences have been really positive. There's always like this rejection that happens at multiple points when you're doing research, because you can apply for grants and not get funded. You can try to publish a manuscript, publish a scientific paper, and even though in general that can be a positive process, the actual like things that happen along the way tend to be negative, because you get critiques of it and reviews and sometimes rejections. And then if you revise the paper according to what the referees want and the editor likes it, then you actually may end up with a published paper, but it's a process. It takes a while. So like there's ups and downs. It's not all positive all the time. And sometimes I can get bogged down in all the things that I have to do to get a research project done or get a paper published. And like you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, is that the just like with so many tasks and things to do, and balancing research and teaching and other, advising and then life outside of work, it can be hard to fit it all in. And so sometimes it's just a matter of trying to find the focus to scratch off one of those to-do list items. And that I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I know I struggle with it. And it's just something that is, I'm always trying to get better at.
I guess, how do you wind down from it all, and what is your work-life balance like?
So I actually will say that this might sound like it's just more work, but it's really not. One thing I really like doing, and I've been enjoying lately, is going out to nature, like the woods or prairie, and just looking around and seeing what I see, because it's actually really fun to just identify plants and insects and animals and things that I don't necessarily spend all day thinking about. I'll give you an example. So I went out to a site and then noticed I noticed these insects on milkweeds that I hadn't really paid much attention to before, but then I was seeing them everywhere, and I'd seen them on our Schaumburg campus, but they're not something I study. It's just, they're these orange and black insects, and they're kind of cool looking. And then I started seeing them in my neighborhood as I was walking around, and noticed there were milkweeds around. And then I started seeing monarchs everywhere too. And so noticing nature has been a fun hobby for me lately, and kind of keeping track of which species I'm seeing and where I'm seeing them, and just appreciating the wildlife around us instead of feeling like I have to study it all the time. So that's been kind of nice, and appreciating the biodiversity of the Chicago area.
Mm-hmm.
And then connecting with other people who appreciate those is also important. I will say. Having other people to nerd out with is a good thing.
What are challenges that you face, I guess, as a researcher, and securing funds and getting published? And is there sort of a competitive environment / culture that sort of might discourage other people?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, it's really hard. It's hard. Publishing is really hard, as I already mentioned. The review process is brutal sometimes, because it's everything gets picked apart. It's you do what you think is your best work, and then it all gets picked apart, and then you revise it and you do more good work, and then if it can take many rounds, or it can take just one round, but that can certainly be getting reviews back or negative reviews back can be challenging. But then, it's part of the process. And then also, yeah, applying for grants, there's really low rates of funding at the federal level. And I think just in general, it's hard to get grants. They're competitive in all places mostly. So yeah, so even just thinking about what kind of more long-term, which research projects can I do without funding? I can't travel to Florida and do research there without funding, but I can drive around the Chicago area and look at plants in the Chicago area, and I can do a lot of things on my computer. So I try to look at it as, when things are good, I'll do certain projects, and when I don't have funding, I'll do other projects, and I'll try to do them all anyway. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And then have you faced other adversity as a woman in research, or has it always just been sort of?
Yeah, if I have, I've probably not spent too much time worrying about it, because unfortunately, I think it's part of life as a woman in the US. But I've had comments, or I don't know, I've probably been taken less seriously than other people at times. I don't know of being discriminated against for that reason, but it's possible it happened. And I think like that's one of the reasons I like my field, is that people are generally respectful of others, although I think diversity could certainly improve in ecology, and I hope it does. And I hope to be involved in ways of making diversity and inclusion improve in ecology. Yeah, but I can't say that I've had any super negative experiences. I mean, there's always this like being out in the wilderness. If you're alone, it's always a little bit of a question, you know, are you going to be safe? If something were to happen, what should you do? What could you do? And I don't really like working alone for that reason, but there are certain places I feel safer than others. So I just try to keep that in mind when I go. Yeah, when I've worked in other countries, I don't work alone. And there's like one challenge, this was actually not related to being a woman, but one challenge I had in a different country was that there was a SWAT team that came to the area because, okay, so I work in mangroves, right, which are swamps, and a lot of people don't like to go into swamps. So they're like an ideal place if you were, say, dropping drugs off. So a SWAT team came and I couldn't go to my field site. That was one thing that happened. Yeah.
And then my final question is, what does research mean to you?
Well, I think it's just a really exciting, like, it's just an exciting thing to do. Like it's part, I think for me, it's part of my identity, because it gives me motivation to learn more and to seek out new information about the world. So for me personally, it's very important, and I think it's important for other people to just learn how science is done, learn how new knowledge is gathered, and I think it's a really important part of being a scientist as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
For sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks for all the questions. I am trying to think if I have any other interesting fieldwork stories, but
That's so interesting.
There's probably more. I just can't think of them right now. All right. Well, thanks for asking.
I hope your son feels better.
Thank you.